Okay, well, let's see. Hang on, I gotta get my.
Who else is on this committee, Michelle?
Hi, Margot. We have Mike Fascitelli, we have you, we have Vahid Armand, and we have President Parlange. And we are now live.
Okay, I'm trying to find my notes here. I think I have to get on my other computer. Hang on. Michelle, did you send me the notes again? I just can't seem to find them.
Sure.
I don't know why I can't find them. I don't know, it's the technological. I call it to what I can't, maybe I may have erased them, but. Did you send on Abby or Michelle?
We're sending the annotated right now.
It probably came from URI BOT address.
Yeah, it should pop right up now. URI BOT.
No. Thank you, Margo. Thank you, Michelle. I got it. Okay. Okay, we can, I'm sorry about that. Okay, we can start off. So welcome to the June 6th, 2024 meeting of the Ad Hoc Special Real Estate Committee to the University of Rhode Island Board of Trustees. The meeting is being held in person with committee meeting members participating remotely. This time, Board Secretary Michelle Carreri will conduct a roll call of attendance to determine if a quorum is present. Please clearly respond present via website or in person when your name is called.
Michael Fascitelli.
Present via WebEx.
Margot Cook.
Present via WebEx.
Vahid Onjazietti. Armand Sabatoni.
Present via WebEx.
Mark Parlange. Okay, we do have a quorum.
Great. Okay, so just the quorum is present, and I call the meeting to order. Reminder to members for the benefit of our audience and the note taker, please identify yourself whenever you comment, make a motion, or second a motion. Participants using WebEx are required to keep the camera on. All of us are, most of us are on WebEx. As a remote member, all persons present at the meeting location must be clearly audible. At this time, I would like to acknowledge the University of Rhode Island occupies the traditional stomping grounds of the Narragansett Nation and the Niantic people. Are there any proposed amendments to the published agenda? No? None, Abby? Okay, so the first order of business is the approval of the minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
So moved. This is Armin.
Thank you.
Second,
Second.
this is Margot.
Thank you. All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, unanimous via WebEx. Let's see. The motion carries. So I think it's over to you, Abby.
Great. Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. It's lovely to see you. We have a couple of discussion items on the agenda. The first is an overview of capital projects timeline at URI. So the goal of this is to really provide an overview of how URI will execute on what we call a SIP level, a capital improvement plan level project. So we work within industry and state guidelines and regulations. And when we plan these major construction projects, we certainly have heard from internal stakeholders and also board stakeholders about how long it takes to complete capital projects. And so the goal of this is to really just provide an education and overview of our process and also get feedback from members of the committee if there are things that you think stand out, that maybe there's a way that we could approach it differently. So again, this is really just educational. So I'm Carl Cavo, our AVP for Facilities, and Ryan Carrillo, our Director of Planning and Real Estate Development, have put this proposal or this presentation together. I'm going to ask Ryan to walk through it. Not only are we looking at sort of a general project at URI, but we've also done some benchmarking against around 30 non-URI projects just to see where we are relative to industry standards. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan to kick us off. And Michelle, I know he has the slides queued. Unless you have the IT team pulling them up on your end, just let us know.
We'll put them up for you right now.
That's great.
Thank
We
you.
did also, just so the committee is aware, we did walk through this recently with URI leadership as well, just as in terms of an educational effort, and got some good feedback from members of the executive team. So appreciate your feedback as well.
Thank you, Abby. So while those are coming up, I just want to say I've presented to you in the past. My style is I welcome your feedback as I go. So feel free to interrupt me if you have a question on something I'm saying. Would love to know your advice on the methods we're using. If there's ways that you see that we can expedite the process. We have a few options shown here to be able to shorten the overall duration. Michelle, I can also, if you'd like.
Yeah. Would it be helpful to have Ryan share?
Yeah,
we
that
don't-
works. We're having a technical difficulty here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
We can't see anything, Ryan, so.
No, let me just let me call this up on this computer.
No,
Okay,
we
can you all see that? Okay.
Yes.
So we're going to discuss the overall typical capital improvement plan project timeline. We'll look at each project phase in detail. We'll provide some input on possible time reducing strategies and benchmark against 29 other recent non-URI projects. So the overall project schedule is shown here. It's not meant to be actually seen, but just to give you a high level, the big picture, a project from the time it's authorized to the time we actually have our students, faculty, and staff in the building is about 4.5 years overall. This is the time schedule that we start with any project. Every project, as you know, is unique, and then it has to be tweaked either lesser or greater timelines depending on what we're doing. But you can see in the timeline above that we have the A&E procurement, we have design, we have permitting, we have construction procurement, and we have construction as kind of the big pictures. I'm going to go through all of these in more detail in the subsequent slides. So A&E procurement, the engineers and architects, typically takes us 6 months. We do this concurrent with our owners, project managers. So we often on these large projects will also employ outside firms to help us with our project management. Overall, we have a process where we develop the RFP. We then work internally here to vet the RFP, launch it through our business office to our university purchasing, and then it goes to state purchases. Most of these size projects are bid both on the procurement of the designer and the construction through state purchases. From there, anything that's shown in this kind of peach color are things that are not directly influenced as far as the timeline by the university. They're usually outside agencies, sister agencies within the state. So it will take a few weeks to get posted on the website. Once it's posted, we give the A&E firms a week to orient themselves to the RFP. We then have a pre-proposal meeting, and we usually give them about 3 weeks to prepare their actual responses. After that, when we receive the responses, we have a technical review committee that evaluates those responses based on their merits, scores them up to 70 points. And then from there, we recommend evaluation interviews for various firms. We score then an additional 30 points, and we go forward into cost proposals. Our overall evaluation of architects is technical, their ability relative to the specific project, their cost proposal, and then their amount of MBE, WB, minority and women-owned business enterprise participation. We will make a recommendation of award, and then once we make a recommendation of award, State Purchases works with the apparent vendor, successful vendor, to get all of the contract documents in place, their insurances, MBE approval, the AAA contract. That typically takes about a 6-week period. From there, we issue the purchase order, and that would complete this 6-month overall process. We see a limited potential way to reduce this by about maybe 2 weeks. Once they're entered into this phase down here where they're providing their contract documents to State Purchases, there is a process by which they submit more in-depth detailed information about their affirmative action plan and such. And so if we were to require them to go through the process of putting all of those plans together and submitting that with their proposal, it could shave off a few weeks in the overall time. However, one of our concerns with that is, frankly, it takes a fair amount of effort for the architects and engineers to put these proposals together. They can spend, $50,000 to $70,000 on a large proposal, overall effort to put it together. And so we don't want to limit our responses by making the process more onerous upfront before they actually have any kind of a certainty that they're going to be selected for the project. Any questions on the A&E selection?
Right, how often are we paying architects to present? Is it the very end, or, to do work to their schemes, or are they doing it on their nickel?
Yeah, so everything you see here, this whole process is on their nickel. We do not pay for their actual proposal submission. They pay for that. It's part of their marketing. We don't start paying them until they're actually with a PO and doing actual design work on the project.
Right, and you're saying that, you're saying 6 months isn't a long process, but in my experience, that's a long process.
No, this is, I agree with you that this is, it's not that it's not a long process, it's just that I see limited ways that we can actually affect change there. We have a lot of requirements relative to our public bidding where we can't just reach out at very limited levels we can. So we have authorization up to $75,000 where we can reach out and work directly with an architect. But at that level, we're doing advanced planning feasibility study work only. We're not going to get into the level of support that this would require with the recent NBC Bay campus. It's millions of dollars for design, which just far exceeds that threshold.
We ever presented, I know this is a little broader, but who would we talk to in state government to show the cost? Like if we were doing this privately and we could do it in half the time, the cost to the state, I would think would be significant from a savings standpoint. Like, is there, Armin, maybe but how would we even go about like showing this is a crazy amount of time for what we're trying to do? And it feels like we're going to go through all these slides, but it just comes down to we get stuck in procurement processes that are so time consuming. Like, is there a way to like say, like, if we did it in 2 years versus whatever this cost, it's gonna save the state millions of dollars?
So I can speak to that a little bit. So we can, if I were to look at the Bay Campus Phase 2 project, if we were to cut out, it's later in the presentation, but if we were to cut out 4 months of the process, that would save us $1.3 million in the current market in escalation.
Yeah, that's
So,
escalations.
It's significant. These projects, the Bay Campus project escalates at over $300,000 a month, just because of the overall size of it. So if we can shave off 3 months off of this process, cut it in half, we would be pushing $1 million in savings on that project. What we do to try to, because we can't change the current regulations. We are subject to those. What we do is we try to advance these procurement processes before the funding otherwise would become available. So if funding is going to become available on July 1st, we know it to be so in the future. We can start to front load this process in February so that we try to mesh up when the actual award is made and we have funding available to when the purchase order is issued. And that's one way that, although it doesn't change the overall time, we still can't start the project till we have funding in hand anyway. So we kind of preload that in advance.
Yeah, and to be clear, we do that
Margot's,
using
to Margot's
university
point,
reserves.
we were talking about 300,000 a month. What, I know we're stuck by regulations, but what are the 2 or 3 things that if we changed would dramatically change the timeline?
So later on in this presentation, actually, we do have some points that will shave off,
Okay.
several months out of the overall process, where we feel we do have some ability to move forward without radically changing procurement overall, because these procurement regulations here are not actually specific to architects and engineers. So changing anything here would be kind of a broad brush change to how the state handles procurement. It wouldn't be focused specifically on the.
But the state changed some of the in-person requirements for meetings based on different groups. So perhaps there's a way to change some of this without changing procurement and requirements or regs for all the state.
Yeah, and they have
And I
given us.
think, go ahead, Ryan. I just want to follow up though.
I was because they have given us some special leeway as the University of Rhode Island. So earlier I mentioned that we have the ability to direct assign up to $75,000 for architects and engineers, for architects at least. The rest of state agencies are limited to 25,000. So it is some relief, but it's not relief on the big scale. That really
Can't get a set of doors for that. Right?
Yeah.
But the biggest cost, Margot, the biggest cost of all these things is they have in our budgets, we have an escalation rate for construction, right? So
Right.
if it's 3-4%, depending on what the inflationary environment is, you can just, time is money, right? It costs a lot of money if you're delayed.
I want to share a couple of points, if I may. So Ryan mentioned we have some special provisions. So we do have a delegation from the state of Rhode Island for procurement to handle procurement under $1 million and for non-state funds, so gift funds, auxiliary funds. So we're able, and that's a delegation that's provided to us from the Director of Administration. So it's not necessarily a permanent delegation, but we work very hard to make sure that stays in place. And as Ryan said, they have given the university some independence in thresholds around things that we purchase. But for a capital project of this size, we're working through the standard straight procurement regulations. We do have, we provide some support to the DOA for somebody to kind of focus on URI projects, which is helpful. I think it would be great if we had somebody that was like really dedicated on moving things along. But there is also a limitation. Ryan mentioned earlier that we hire outside project managers. I have to also just be clear that we have limited resources internally, so we're managing huge numbers of projects. So any of our project managers or any of our planners or architects, we just have a pretty small staff that's managing lots of capital projects. So obviously, if we were more resourced, we might be able to move things along internally quicker, but the team does an amazing job, in my mind, juggling the load that they have when it comes to internal review. You'll see and hear a lot of, like here you see a slot for technical review and interviewing. Most of our projects have to have a committee, right, that reviews the proposal. We also have committees for design that have to have lots of faculty and stakeholder representation. And part of that is the nature of a university, which is maybe different than a corporation that might be going through this. So that also kind of factors into a lot of the time that we have to.
Are those things controllable? Like, can we say we don't want to have all these committees to take all this time?
So under the regulations here, with what we're looking at here, this technical review committee is required by the process. We are required to have no less than 3 members. So there are certain requirements that we do have built into the procurement regulations.
And for some of the others, for design committees, which we'll get to later, we certainly want stakeholder representation. We want the users of the facilities to be there. I just mention it because obviously sometimes it can be challenging to get big groups together, especially when you're taking into account academic calendar. But anyway, let's move on to the next slide.
So I mentioned that this is concurrent with the owner's program management solicitation. So that's this. It's the same exact process we go through for the architect. So I'm going to move on to then the next stage. Design schedule. So our average design schedule from the time we issue a purchase order to an architect to the time that a project is ready to go out to permitting is 13 months. So just to note, on the lower side of the slide, we have benchmarking. I worked with 8 architects to get a list of 29 current or just wrapped up projects that are in the pipeline for them, both public and private institutions of higher ed. Residential average time was 16 months. For classroom buildings, it was 13 months, and for wet lab buildings, the average timeline was 19 months. And that was over 13 buildings that I reviewed. So within this period, we have our standard, we have the kickoff meeting, we have programming, we have a time of URI review and approval. We then kick into schematic design. Within schematic design, at the end of that, we have a period by which we have 2 separate cost estimators do independent cost estimating, and then we have a process to reconcile those. We then have internal approvals. We move forward to design development. Design development is a time, it's a little bit longer, you can see here as far as the duration, because we also, that's where we're really getting into the nitty-gritty of the design, working out the details, working with facilities operations, working with a lot of our campus community to make sure that it's being set up and designed correctly. From there, we also do a follow-up estimate. 2 estimators, same process, come together, reconcile, move forward into construction documents. Within the construction documents period, we also engage with outside peer review. So depending on the project, we'll have peer review for the envelope, the mechanical systems. We will have our commissioning agent hired on board within design development so that we have input from third parties to double check our designs, make sure that what we're designing, what we're ultimately building is done properly. From there, we go into the permitting stage, which is the next slide. This is not one where I see an opportunity for us to reduce duration. Yes, Abby.
Ryan, I just want to make one mention, which is the reason this phase is so critical and why we have multiple estimators and we do the peer review is that once we get to the bidding process for construction, it's very difficult to change things after the fact, right? So it's not, I think you probably have more flexibility in the private sector if there's something that comes up or it wasn't envisioned correctly to negotiate that once you're into the construction bidding phase. But here, if it's not in the sort of RFP, it's really hard to change it. So that's why we put a huge emphasis on getting the design correct on the front end. Obviously that you want to do that anyway, but we're even more limited, I think. As a
Ryan, did you say there's no opportunity on the permitting to 276 days?
Well, we'll get into that next.
Oh.
So that we haven't discussed yet. So, and that's actually, Tom, where the most opportunity I think actually lies.
Okay.
So the other thing to note here is when people think about the estimating and the need for the accuracy, I think people's minds always go to the fact that we don't want to be over budget. But at the same time, we don't want to be under budget because we want to maximize how much we can deliver for the campus. And if on bid day we come in grossly under budget, it's very difficult for us to add additional scope. We do use add alts very heavily within our design process so that on that bid day we have the ability to either accept less or accept more. But that also adds to the time it takes to design these projects to add in all of these options. So permitting. So once we're done with the design, we go through a permitting process. Some of it happens concurrently. So you can see here that the Department of Environmental Management, the Coastal Resource Management Group, those 2 environmental groups we do concurrent with the design process that we just spoke to. If we have to go through a historic review, we also do that concurrent with that design process. But then subsequent to the completion of the construction documents, and it's actually only about preloaded by 3 weeks or so, we go out with a permit set to the Rhode Island Building Code Commissioner's office and the State Fire Marshal's office. Those processes here, you can see they're each allocated in our schedule about 8 weeks. Case in point here, the Solaviv project was a 17-week duration for us to get through permitting. One aspect here, and this is, I think, that one of the biggest differences between us and private institutions is that private institutions will often track the permitting and the construction bidding simultaneously. And so in the past at the university, many, many years ago, I've been here for 17 years and it predates me, this was something that could be done. But what happened was there was a concern that if the code review resulted in a significant change to the project, it could invalidate the bid. So if we were going out to bid at the same time and then the code officials found something that was a problem and they changed the project significantly, the idea was we'd have to rebid the project. One thing we do to mitigate that is Carl Calvo leads the effort to meet with the Rhode Island Building Code and Fire Marshal's office monthly to make sure that we're properly aligned with them. They know what projects are coming down the pipeline. We can discuss what the issues are with the projects. And by the time they get the project, they're already very familiar with it. But we still see, just because of their workload overall and their resources, that it does take, about this 16-week period to get through that. So this, Tom, is the place where we really could, if we chose to come together and we say that we're going to go out to bid for construction and go through permitting simultaneously, we could have the option to cut off 4 months out of our overall duration, which noted here for NBC Phase 2, that equates to one more wet lab. So it actually can influence, what we deliver for the campus. Right now, there's no statute or purchasing regulation that precludes this overlapping. It's just kind of the idea that we could have to rebid it. But if in the rare event that had to happen, all it would do was add on the 4 months back to what we otherwise would have had anyway. So this is where we see the best opportunity in the overall duration of the project to cut down the schedule.
And I think we've done a lot of good work in the design process to add in, the additional estimators, the peer review, as Ryan mentioned, that I think the risk of this, I think, is less than it probably was back in the day when we decided to do it subsequently. So I do think I agree with Ryan that this is a place where we could have.
Who do we talk to about that? Who's the person that makes?
I think it's a risk-based decision internally. There's no requirement that we do it. But go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, there's no requirement, but anything that's bid to state purchases, they have put into place their own practice that they want that letter from the building code commissioner. So they have given us relief from that at times. The recent project for the fine arts building, they allowed us to go out to bid when we were partially the way through the permitting, so it shaved off a little bit of time. So I think we just have to pursue it more with state purchases. Okay. Construction procurement. So this is a little bit shorter than the A&E because the selection of the contractor is more expedited, but it's a 4-month process. Again, currently non-overlapping with any other process. We get the documents as approved by the code officials. We put them out for bidding on the street. They are out there typically for about 4 weeks for the contractors to prepare their bids. They come in, takes us a couple weeks to go through and look at the bids, make sure that they're apples to apples. We then will typically have a pre-award meeting with the apparent low bidder to go through with the contractor to just double check that all of our scope is indeed in their numbers. We then make a recommendation for award to purchasing. And then it goes through that same process that the architects and engineers went through, where they're providing their insurance, their minority business paperwork. They're doing their AIA contracts. It's about a 6-week process from the tentative award letter to the issuance of a purchase order. And then from there, we're off into construction. This
Ryan,
also,
are we getting a GMP at the end of this process in these cases?
so we do lump sum bidding for most of our bids. So it's a GC lump sum bid. So it is like a GMP where it's a guaranteed price, but unlike a
Financial institutions like debt holders, but I don't see us getting a GMP in this process. He's more getting an estimate.
No, actually, the process we do, a lump sum bid, is actually as concrete as a GMP. And we do, like for the Bay Campus Phase 2, we have gotten permission to do the CMAR, which will have the GMP at the end. But the lump sum bid is a definite price. It's not an estimate. They are held to that as long as we don't change the scope. They are held to that. We also put into our contracts liquidated damages. So on the schedule side for construction, which we'll get into in the next slide, if the contractor doesn't meet the schedule that is required within the bid, we also assess daily charges, and those vary anywhere from $500 a day up to $10,000 a day, depending on the type of project we're working on. Any other questions about the procurement aspects? Construction, it's only 3 lines, but basically, you know, our base project of a scale at this level starts at about 24 months. We will reduce that down for some of the easier projects, but then there's other projects like the upcoming Memorial Union, which is going to be renovating a building that's occupied. So it'll be longer than 24 months because we'll have to successfully walk through the building in 4 phases. But you can see here the same benchmarks that we have at the bottom. The average of those 29 buildings, residential was 22 months, classroom buildings was 20 months, and wet lab was 35 months. So you can imagine, especially these are all buildings that were either completed post-pandemic or started post-pandemic. And we've seen the duration of construction really elongate. We have, you know, we had a generator that we ordered for a large building that took over a year to come in. Switch gear is at 70 weeks still currently. A lot of the electrical gear is still long lead time. Mechanicals, HVAC equipment is still long lead time. So 24 months is our average time for a large project. Then we have, as you can see, we have a little bit of a buffer. We that's for any unknown, just like you put in a construction contingency into a project from a budgetary point of view. We put a buffer in for unknown conditions that may elongate the schedule. That when we bid the project is not known to the contractor. And then we have a time for furniture, fixtures, and move-in of the actual occupants to settle them into the new building.
Any other questions on that? Again, it's just a high-level overview. But happy to answer any questions or hear other feedback.
So
And
Ryan,
as a
if you
reminder,
just,
oh, go ahead.
a quick question. If you weren't involved and the state of Rhode Island wasn't involved, what do you think? Just say you were doing this, URI could do it himself. What would you estimate that we would do radically different here?
So I think that we would probably have more long-term relationship with design agents. So not everything would be reworking from the beginning. And what that does is allow us to quickly negotiate a cost. It also allows us to negotiate scope with them. So most private institutions, you know, they won't take 6 months to issue a purchase order to a designer, but they'll still take 2 to 3 months.
Right.
Because you still want to have your due diligence period to make sure that the contract is properly protecting us. The design, I don't actually think there's much wiggle room, private or public, to change that. It just takes time to make the design done right, to make sure, especially in the lump sum bidding that we do have. Procurement on the construction side, that's something that if we were on the private side, we could actually be working in advance and overlapping that completely with the design process even. And we could be overlapping the process with the permitting more. So we could really effectively wipe out that 4 months of procurement out of the mix because we would be overlapping that. Construction, I don't see a change. It doesn't affect us, you know, unless we're going to start really affecting the cost of construction. So if we were a private institution where funding was less constrained, you can pay to play and get switch gear and get other things lined up early. You know, you can skip the line if you're willing to pay. But then that goes, you know, it might expedite the project and reduce escalation and get it, but it increases the cost of the project because you're paying extra
pay for second and third shift. It costs you more. Privates
That's
might come to the table with that, right?
That's another thing that we did at my previous institution is we did run 3 shifts on construction, but where that's what that's going to be something that the university has to consider. What's more critical, getting it 6 months earlier or getting it, you know, 15% less. And so it's all there's a pendulum there of the time versus the money.
Yeah, and I'll just add a couple things. So obviously we're incredibly grateful for all the state support that makes a lot of these projects possible. So clearly working within the state parameters is something that we try to do, and we work really hard to maintain positive relationships with the DOA. I will say, and Carl and Ryan can speak to this, we've seen kind of fewer and fewer bidders, which I think is problematic because I think there are firms out there that just recognize that it's going to be more challenging to work with a public university and have worked in Rhode Island. And so that results in less competition and gives us fewer choices. So that in my mind is problematic. That's a trend. I will say also from kind of a credit standpoint, I think it's viewed beneficially.
Products, that's a
Yeah.
problem too. By the way, I want to add the efficiency, I personally think of the operation of URI is pretty good. It's with what you guys do, with the staff that you have, I think you're moving it as fast as you can move it. What we could do is you could put your ideas down as to where you think we can buy 4 months, 3 months, 2 months, working with purchasing, and then we can test the waters and see if there's an appetite to make some exemptions for us. You know, we'll talk to the House, the Senate, and the governor and see. I am sure that if we look in all the different entities associated with the parent of the state, like one in particular, whether it's resource recovery or it's some of the other ones, I know there's exemptions. I don't know the magnitude of the exemptions they have when they're building. So let's give it a shot. Let's look at it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that's part of this kind of putting this together, you know, and the team has also put together sort of project specific timelines of our most recent large projects. So we have a lot of that data to help inform that conversation. So part of this process and having this presentation to you today is to get that.
Brian, look up Narragansett Bay Commission. I would suggest that anything and every possible exemption they got. So let's try to see what some of the others have and how successful they were. And I would obviously make the argument that, you know, if they gave the exemption there, why not us?
QDC also, I believe, has some exemptions as a quasi.
I am a huge supporter of that. Like, it's going to cost the state and taxpayers. I mean, we can show that like there's a cost to time, and these escalation clauses are way different than they used to be. They're excessive, and I think and Abby, you said this before, if we need to hire another lobbyist or we need to put like lobbying pressure, or there's a way to do it the way Armin's describing, it's like what we had to do 3 years ago when Mark came on and explained to the state what the benefit of URI was and what the budget looks like relative to the growth of the university and the impact on the state. These things are, all these projects will make for a much better university, which makes for a much better state, which is very much in line with the governor's goals. And, you know, to see something that takes us so much longer than what it needs to, because there's going to be time that's going to take to build these things. And Ryan and you laid out really well. But if there's places to save time because it costs us money, just because it's bureaucratic and just because it's how we used to do it, I think we have some political capital to point that out, and it's ultimately better for everyone if we can figure out, and if it's exemptions or, I mean, changing policy and changing process is very difficult. So if it's exemptions, that's the road to go down. I would really encourage you, and if we have to spend some more money on lobbying, let's do it. Or if there's another way to position it, I really think like there's places where the state is just, you know, like, hey, this is how you have to do it. But we are the biggest landholder in the state, and the stuff that we want to do over the next several years is proportionately bigger than anybody else. And I think we have to figure out how to use that, the power of that, to help the state ultimately make good decisions.
I think the speaker would welcome it, Margot. I mean, he's looking for ways. This is not about giving URI a break. This is about the state spending money wisely. And it's 300,000 a month, just in a few projects. So it's not like we're trying to do it, go around the state. We're trying to work with the state. And they've asked us to bring some solutions to them to lower the costs while they give us a bigger proportion of the budget. So here's one.
So maybe what we could do is, Armin, you and I can talk about the approach to that. Like Joe's in the middle is the budget and all that stuff, but maybe once that's done, we sit down with him and we can synthesize this with Abby and Ryan and say, here's scenario A and here's scenario B. How do we get to B? Like, it's significant dollars for the state.
I think you're both right, and I think they would listen. Ryan, when you're doing your research, look at UConn and look at UMass. See if they've got what type of authority they have to pull off project. Look, we're going to make a case. If we're going to get where they want us to get, there's going to be a lot of construction. There's going to be a lot of buildings. If that P3 legislation passes, they're accepting that also, and I think it will in this session. So
That's a lot of jobs.
yeah, I mean, look, the general philosophy there was they're always looking at their affiliate entities, whether it's us or the other 250 entities that they oversee, is whether we get over our skis, whether we're doing the purchasing right, the bidding prospect right, the due diligence, how we're doing the permitting. But you're right. At this point, I think we've got serious political capital and credibility at this point to be able to go in there and make the case. And in the end, Margot, what you had said, we're trying to save the money. We're going to do it right. We're going to do it right, and at the same time, get projects faster and save them money at the same time.
Okay, I will take those four groups.
I think the way to get that done, though, Ryan, is I think that we need to, like, most of the things I've seen, they get it by either running things in parallel or taking the turnaround time down. So we have 4 weeks to do a review and you make it 3. That's 25%, right? So you don't say, well, we're not going to do the review. You don't jam them. What I've seen happen is they take the turnaround times down where it makes sense. They do things in parallel where it makes sense. They don't take on increased risk. Like, as you know, if you fast track something, the risk could go up. So I think you just have to go through like a project and say, if this could be 3 weeks, it's 4 weeks, 6 weeks goes to 4. And where you're not thinking you're sacrificing quality, that would be a very good case study, what you thought you could take out of something and ask for that turnaround time to go down. And I think the ability to parallel certain of those tasks, that's what I would suggest is where all the money is.
And I think the ability to shave that turnaround also speaks to something that Abby mentioned, was just our own internal resources for project management staff to be able to keep, focused on that and keep it pushing things forward. So,
The other thing, not to belabor this, the best system I ever saw was when Marty Walsh became mayor of Boston. He set up a criteria, especially on the permitting, that everything went online from the date you filed the application with DEM or coastal or historical or purchasing of the city, and they all had a finite period of time to get it through their system and get it out.
Right.
That cut projects in half
Right.
as far as waiting for permits and so forth. I mean, it's something we can advocate also for certain cities and towns. Obviously, the town that we're in, also, or when we need state help to try to expedite that also. That was a great system. The contractors, developers, builders all knew where they stood, how fast things could get done and how it got done.
Great call, Arvid. Great call.
Yeah,
That worked.
yeah, that was a good one. I think we're on to something.
Thank you for that work, though, Abby and Ryan. It's very detailed. And it gives us the basis to be able to help you figure this out.
Yeah, thank you. And I also want to acknowledge Carl, since he's come to the university. He retired Coast Guard. I'm not biased. Retired Coast Guard engineer who oversaw a lot of facilities, but he's put in place a lot of these processes as well to make sure that we're getting our design accurate and managing the project managers as efficiently as possible. So it's really a team effort. So
Great.
thanks for all the feedback, and I do hope that we can translate this into some action in the next few months. So.
Want to move on to the next thing?
Yep,
Abby?
that sounds great. So the next item is an update on the campus master plan. And Michelle, I know there was a slide. I'm not sure if you're still having technical difficulties. We could bring it up. You let me know.
James has it. We're pulling it up.
All right, great. So I'm very pleased to announce that after a national RFP, we have engaged with Sasaki Architects to conduct our campus master plan. This is something, as you know, the board has been pushing on, and I've been pushing on since I got in this role. Sasaki is a really amazing, well-regarded international firm. They have about 350 employees. They have a specialty in working in higher education. They've undergone numerous campus master plans. They're also familiar with URI. They helped us with design for Brookside. They've been a partner with us on some of these recent conversations about our new university housing. So you can see here just some of the firms, some of the institutions they worked in. They did do a plan for University of Colorado Boulder that I was involved in when I was at that campus. I'm just very excited about it. So we just had a kickoff meeting with them. The goal is to have a final plan in place this time next year for presentation to the kind of campus community and the board in September when the community is back from summer break. So we'll be working diligently to engage campus stakeholders. So they're going to meet with students, faculty, staff, take a look at what our housing needs are, building on the housing master plan, take a look at our energy needs. We're also kicking off an energy master plan. We did an RFP for the energy master plan. The competitive bidder is the firm that is a sub to Sasaki on the energy piece. So there's going to be an alignment there as well. Looking at our strategic plan and our research goals. These are all the things that the firm will look at as they're undergoing this process. So at the end of the process, we will have a long-term vision of the campus and the community that'll focus on physical solutions to address our needs, sort of overall campus framework, and also a 10-year capital development plan that will identify key projects and give very kind of high-level estimates of what will be required to implement that plan. So again, I appreciate the support of the board in this effort. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Abby, I would
Great.
also mention the FCAs that are ongoing. So we're about
yeah.
halfway through that. So that's a major undertaking that will support both master plans that we're running.
I like the fact that they've worked with a lot of state universities, so.
Yep.
So Carl mentioned the FCA's, the facility condition assessment. So we're undergoing a comprehensive across our campuses assessment of every building to understand the condition that the buildings are in. So that's also really valuable data that the CMP firm will use as they're looking at the long-term plan. And it'll also help us just with capital planning overall.
Abby, how are we paying? This didn't go through the state procurement plan, did it?
We went through an RFP and we're using university reserves to pay for this.
Okay, so
we did through a competitive process.
but the state wasn't involved in it, was it?
The state was, yeah, because it was envisioned over the threshold of our delegation. So we went through the state purchasing process.
That was what time I thought we bypassed that. We did.
No, we're not unable to.
How are we paying these guys?
Through reserves, university
No,
reserves.
how is it on time and materials? Is it fixed fee? How are we paying them?
Fixed fee. Any other questions about that? And we're happy to give the board. I think that I hope that the planners will also talk to members of the board that are interested, potentially this committee, Finance and Facilities Committee, as key stakeholders. So we'll keep you posted as the process unfolds.
Great.
Great.
I think, is that it before we go into executive session, Abby?
That's it.
I think the next item is on the agenda is item 3, executive session. So I'd like to get a motion that the ad hoc special real estate committee convene into executive session for discussions or consideration related to the acquisition or lease of real property for public purposes or for the disposition of publicly held property wherein advanced public information
I move it.
would be detrimental to the public interest pursuant to RIGL S 42465A5 in discussion of matters related to the question of the investment of public funds where the premature disclosure would adversely affect the public interest pursuant to RIGL 42, 46, 45A7 for each of the three discussion items below, including update on new university housing, update on the URI campus store, hotel market study update. I need a motion if I can get one for that.
I move it, Tom Ryan.
Second.
Second.
And thank you. All in favor, please say yes.
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 Any
Did we have a
abstentions?
motion from a committee member, Mike? Sorry, just to jump in.
Okay. Dominic, can I get a motion from you?
Oh, so moved.
I get a second from you, Margot, I guess a Tom.
Second.
All right,
Thanks.
okay, all unanimous? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so all in favor, the motion is approved. So we will now convene the executive session, which will last approximately 60 minutes, after which we convene an open session. The live stream will be paused during executive session and resume once it is ended and the committee reconvenes an open session. For those committee members participating via WebEx, please confirm by saying yes that no other person is present or able to hear executive session discussion at this time. Everyone's confidential?
We're good.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. If you do not automatically move into the breakout session, join the session when prompted on your computer screen by clicking the Join Now button. Do we have that, Michelle?
You'll have it very shortly.
There we go. Join. Hit join.
Okay. Okay, so we're automatically live. We're in open session and it defaults so that you're all muted. So just keeping that in mind.
So the ad hoc special committee, real estate committee is now convened in open session. The first order of business in open session is a motion. I need to seal the executive session minutes. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Thanks, second.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you. The minutes, any discussion on sealing the minutes? All in favor? Yes.
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 Any opposed? No. The motion is approved. So with that, we can, I think, get to the most important thing, which is I need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Second, all in favor, please say yes.
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 Yes, thank you. Any abstain? Anybody? No? No? Okay, great. The motion is approved. Thank you all for your time. We got a little time back, so thank you.
All right, good job.
Thanks,
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Very
Bye-bye.
nice.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.